No matter your starting point, you can acquire the skills that are necessary to have a successful and fun dating life and successful long-term relationships. I'm Martin. I've been a dating and relationship coach for over 17 years, and today we're going to talk about that process of learning and acquiring those skills. Now, one of the problems that guys, especially guys, encounter when they want to learn how to be better with dating and with their relationships is they often get pushback from other people in their lives trying to tell them that, you know, what they're doing is inauthentic or isn't who they really are or some other, you know, ridiculousness like this. But there's a big difference between who you are and how you do things. So for example, like there are people who grow up and they are in an environment like me. I was like this where I was always late. My family, everyone in my family was always late. And then later on in life, I learned how to be more on time. Now, I'm not perfect, but I'm certainly a lot better than I was before. And this doesn't make me a different person. I just learned how to be on time and how to think about planning and my schedule and things a little bit different. This didn't make me a different person, and now I wasn't like keeping it real or something. It was just like, you know, I just decided to change this behavior of mine that I thought wasn't really helpful for me. And so in the same way, when it comes to dating and relationships, there's a big difference between who you are and how you do things. And so when we're talking about improving your dating skills, improving your relationship skills, it's about changing how you do things. There's plenty of things that you can look back at your life and you can think, oh, if I'd known this sooner, there are these situations that I would have handled differently. But you just didn't have the information to know how to handle it differently in ways that would have worked out better for you. And you don't look at those situations and go, oh, well, you know, that's not the right thing for me because that's not me. It's like you want certain outcomes in your life. And when you learn how to get the better outcomes, you just want to adopt those practices. For some reason, when it comes to dating and relationships, people have this idea that this is some unique realm of human endeavor that you just magically become this thing that is going to be good at relationships and very appealing, when it's very obvious from statistics that plenty of people are really bad at relationships. And there's Gottman, who ran this relationship lab in Chicago, I think it was, and he has a bunch of books. And you know, he did a lot of detailed study, bringing couples in, interviewing them, watching them interact with one another, and learning what some of the key skills are for successful relationships. And he talks about those in his books. One of those is something I'll get into in another video. He talks about how people request attention and how when people request attention, the amount of times their partner gives them attention and the kind of attention they give is a key determinant of how successful that relationship is. And so, yeah, we'll go into that in another video, but that's a great example where it's a skill that you can learn to notice some behavior from your partner and you can improve the way that you react to that behavior. And if you do that one thing, the chances of your relationship surviving long term increase dramatically. Now, would you say, oh, well, that's not me, I don't want to learn that, and instead go through some terrible divorce? Or would you rather learn that skill and become a better partner? Obviously, only an idiot wouldn't want to learn that skill and become a better person. And the key thing to understand about this is that first, you have to learn the underlying principles of things. So if you're a baseball pitcher, for example, you have to learn the underlying principles and dynamics of being a good pitcher. How to hold the ball, how to swing your arm, how to coordinate that with the movement of your lower body, how to shift your weight, all of those things. You learn the basic principles, and every pitcher learns that stuff. And first, it's going to be mechanical, it's going to be unnatural, and after they learn all of those skills and they integrate them, then they develop their own unique style. But it's not that everyone just learns how to pitch on their own and they never get any coaching and they don't learn the underlying principles and they become the best pitcher. Of course not. They all learn the basics, and you have to learn the basics, because without that basic fundamentals, then you can't be successful against people who do know those basics and fundamentals. And it's the really great people that then take those basics and those fundamentals and add it to their particular physiology, their particular mindset, and once that's integrated, then they can have their own unique style that can be superior to somebody else's unique style. Obviously, if everyone just learned the principles and mechanically followed them, no pitcher would be better than another. It's the combination of those two, and the combination of those two takes time. And so in dating also, in the beginning, it's natural that when you adopt new skills and new techniques, that they're going to feel unnatural because you haven't yet mastered those skills to the point where you can then bridge the gap between who you are as a person and how you implement these skills. You know, you can think of it in many cases, like with learning almost any skill. What you start off doing is you start off copying people that are great at it already. That's how you start, because that copying is what allows you to get a deep understanding of what it is that you're doing. And then once you have that deep understanding, then you can change it and you can modify it and integrate those principles with your own strengths and weaknesses, right? Because obviously each of us is going to be slightly different. As a great example of this would be humor. All comedians learn the basics of comedy to be successful comedians. They sit down, they craft their jokes, they put in a lot of work. They study other comedians, they study famous jokes, and they learn how to do the body language and the delivery. But when you look at famous comedians, they don't all look alike. They don't all tell the same kind of jokes. Some comedians curse a lot. Some comedians don't. Some comedians use very dry humor. Some comedians have many slapstick elements, but the principles, the underlying principles are the same, and they all learn those underlying principles. And so it's no different in dating and relationships. Now, so let me take a great example of some areas where some of my clients have gotten pushback from friends and family when they made some changes. So some of them made some changes to how they dress, for example. And then, their friends and family say, oh, that's not you, that's not your style or whatever. And here's the thing, one of them, when he's changed how he dressed, he said that before people thought that he was in his mid-20s, or late 20s, and people thought he was a college student because of the way he dressed. So is that really being authentic? Because you're coming across as something that you're not? I would say absolutely not. But the reason he did that wasn't because he spent a lot of time thinking about this. That was just that he had adopted this and he never updated it. And that goes for a lot of our relationship and dating skills, is that we have some conception that we get at some age and then we never update it. And it's not really representative of who we are now. A lot of things can be like that. I remember when I was, I don't remember probably exactly when it was, maybe when I was in middle school or when I got into high school. And up until that point, I had on my light switch at home, I had this a Snoopy light switch. And then one day my dad just came in and took it off and then replaced it with just a plain, light switch cover. And I was like, oh, and it's just, my dad was just like, oh, you're too old for that now. And the reality is you're never too old to enjoy the things that you enjoy. However, you also have to understand that there is a certain context for those things too. So while it wasn't particularly important that I changed this Snoopy, light switch cover, it is important to understand that at different life stages, there are different expectations. And those different expectations require us to have a certain, or to project a certain image. And that's really what we're talking about here, is that if you want to be attractive to women, and women, if you want to be attractive to men, there are certain things that are required of you. Now, I know, there's a lot of variance, right? And so you could say, okay, well, depending on your kind of niche, right? Like, if you're a musician, actually a musician is a great example, because depending on the type of musician you are going to be will decide a lot about what your options are in terms of how you present yourself. Now, of course, people can break that mold, but normally people break that mold once they've already become successful, because if they try and do their own thing too early, people are going to write them off before they even get a chance. So that's very key, is that a lot of the time, because people are going to judge you based on what they already know, that if you don't present in a certain way, then you're not going to get a chance. And so, as I was talking about with my client who had previously dressed like he was a university student, he didn't get invited out to so many events. But when he changed his style and updated his style to match who he really was, which was he was an architect, when he started to dress more like someone who had a successful career, he started to get invited to social events. And women started to look at him as a viable dating partner because they weren't interested in dating a university student. And so that's kind of important. Now, later on, he could, I'm sure, if he's having a weekend at home and he's just kicking it, even if he's with a girl, then sure, he could dress, in a casual way and it's not gonna matter. But in the beginning, you have to do things and conform to some expectation. Now, women in particular are often very against this idea of guys learning about how to be good with women and good with their dating and good with their relationships, because it breaks their romantic idea, right? Their romantic idea is that, in romance, nothing is planned. Everything is magical, right? And unfortunately, real life is not like that. Now, it's, the same is true for women in a lot of ways, because some women will point out that the time it takes for them to do their hair and do their makeup and all these things, they don't just magically appear perfect. Now, the difference, of course, is that a lot of this stuff that women do is they do it for other women. And whereas for guys tend not to care that much about how we look on the outside. And so in our case, we're doing it specifically for women most of the time. But, obviously there are other situations like we do it for a career and things like that. But a large part of it is for women, not to be impressive to our friends. Whereas for women, that's often a big driving force of their behavior. So it's not as tailored to men. And this is a lot of the reason, why women have this idea these days, like, I don't want to do stuff for a man. I don't want to do this stuff. Whereas guys never think that. A guy goes, well, I'm not going to do that for a woman. It's like, well, yeah, but you kind of have to, or you just don't get any. So, guys don't really have this so much. But for women, the romantic idea is that you are not changing or doing anything, that you are effortlessly attractive to them, and you effortlessly create wonderful and amazing experiences for them, even though, that's totally unrealistic. So you got to understand that it's not a good idea, especially in the beginning when you're first getting to starting to date a woman, for her to know what you went through. It's very tempting to talk about everything you went through to get to be at this point in your life where you could be with, an attractive woman and you could be an attractive partner. But it's generally very negative to talk about that, because from a woman's perspective, it's very unromantic. Even though later on in the relationship, once she really likes you, when you talk about the hard work that you put in, then they can appreciate it. But in the beginning, not so much.